Welcome to Candlewick Library. I'm Cheryl, and today I'm sharing the books I read in May. Usually I share the books that I've read in order of how I read them every month, but this month I'm going to do it a little differently, and I'm going to start with DNFs and go all the way to my favorite books of the month. I had a few DNFs in May. Sometimes I have a DNF where I just completely stop reading the book. I might just close it and never go back to it. Or I might stop reading and go to the end, find out how the end is. And then there's other times when I basically just speed read, just skim through the whole book to the end. So I know that I'm missing things, but there's something about the book that makes me want to see if it gets better by skimming. I don't know if any of that makes sense. I am a weird reader sometimes. And every single one of the DNFs this month was that way. I would get to a certain point where I realized, okay, there's things here that I am not enjoying. And so I'm going to skim through it to see if it gets any better. And by the time I get to the end, it never had. I'm going to start with those books. Like I said, the first one was Arthur Miller's The Death of a Salesman. This is a play, and I was reading it for my American literature course and using it for reading the classics. I just found this story to be really depressing. And I don't mind depressing. I don't mind books that are heavy, but this one just did not hit any of the right notes with me for a book that had that in it. I would say content warnings for this would be adultery. There was some language and suicide. There was probably deeper meanings here that I was supposed to get from this, but I just didn't like it. I didn't like the story. And after having read other things by him, I was surprised because other things did have also darker tones or, more depressing ideas, and I still really enjoyed, but this one, not for me. The second book was Extinction by Douglas Preston. This is the book I was reading for my Jurassic Reading Challenge for something that has to do with extinction. And this is basically supposed to be kind of like Jurassic Park, or you get those vibes, but it's other animals that they're bringing back. So at the beginning, you start with a man and a woman who are on their honeymoon, and they have decided to go to this place where they have been doing genetic engineering to bring back animals. They have a guide there with them that is taking them on this really, really long hike through this really beautiful area and seeing the animals. They're looking at woolly mammoths when we meet them. There does end up being a twist to the book about something else that they have brought back, which is the thing that is causing the problems, because people start dying. At the very beginning, there are, I would say, violent murders. I thought one thing at first and I was wrong. And so when I did this skimming, then I started to think something else, and then that was the correct thing. So I would say that there's a lot of content issues. Why is there sexual content in a book like this? I don't know. That was pretty mild right at the very beginning, but it's still there and it's still annoying to me because sometimes I feel like that there's certain men that when they write women, they have to add those kind of things. So that was something I felt in this one a little bit. There was a lot of swearing, but for me, it was more than that. It was that every single character in this book felt like a stereotype. That can be common in action books, but it felt even more so in this. It was like, here's this person, that this woman who needs to be taken seriously is going to be a jerk and hate all the men and be really mean to them. And this man is going to be mean to her just because she's a woman. And this man is going, I don't know. It just very stereotypical people. Felt like caricatures instead of real characters. Also, there were a lot of Jurassic Park references in this book, so it was very obvious that he wanted people to know that that's what he was going for. But then also, he has a character in it that was reading a book, and he misses the murders because he's really into this book. They asked him what book it was. It was a book by this author. He even says that. He even says by Douglas Preston and the other person that wrote it with him. I can't remember their name. And they say, was it good? Oh, I couldn't put it down. And I don't know this author well enough to know if he has a sense of humor that his devoted readers would understand, that maybe that was a tongue-in-cheek nod to something that I don't know about. But it felt very weird. That was pretty early on in the book, and it really turned me off from his writing. And I don't know if that's a weird thing to have that effect on me, but it really annoyed me. I just thought it was really strange. I'm a little nervous now because I know that one of the books that is a Michael Crichton book that was put out after he died, that this is the author that wrote it, that was part of it. So I hope that I will like it, but I don't know yet. I'll find out when I get to it, but I didn't think he was a terrible writer as far as how he put the story together, the ideas, all of that. I felt like this could have been a really good idea if done differently, or maybe by somebody else. The next one I don't have anymore, so I already got rid of it, and I will just put a picture up here. It was Yesteryear, and I just forgot the name of the author, and I do not have it written down for some reason. It is the buzzy book right now. Everybody's reading it, it feels like. And every store I've gone into recently has been pushing it. This is a book that tells the story of a trad wife, like an influencer trad wife. The idea behind it is that she is an influencer as this trad wife, showing this older way, this more traditional, old-fashioned way of living from a certain time period. But then she finds herself living in that actual time period. I was very intrigued by that. Here in Utah, obviously, I think a lot of people know there are a lot of influencers that are from Utah that are the family vlogger, those kind of influencers. And when I started reading this book, I feel like if you read it and you know who Ballerina Farm is, that you really can tell that that is the inspiration for the book. However, she makes the girl in it, she swears a lot when in her mind, like you're in the girl's mind. So she swears and she says things that I don't think Ballerina Farm, I don't even remember her real name, say or think. I mean, who knows? I don't know her. I don't want to call anybody out here, so it's hard to say it too much. But I've met a few of the influencers, and I've heard, and I know people who have known some of the influencers, and basically across the board, what most people would give as the consensus is it's all very fake. And it's all very much, here's what we're filming, but this is where we really live. This is who really takes care of my kids, and this is who really cooks. I think it's kind of common knowledge by now that the people that are the biggest family and lifestyle vloggers are usually fake. I thought it would be really interesting to see how that was portrayed in the book and what happens when they really are put in that lifestyle, because I understand that. I mean, I'm a traditional wife in a lot of ways. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I homeschool my kids. I cook and clean. My husband works, and I'm very drawn to an older, more simpler time period where I think that sounds amazing. However, if I woke up in that time period and had to do all those things, would I be able to? Would I like it? I don't know. I had very mixed feelings going into this, knowing that some people look at any woman who is a traditional wife as a negative thing, but then also knowing that most of these people who are doing it online are fake. And so I thought it would be a really interesting book. It was, in a lot of ways. I would say that there was, again, a lot of sexual content, and I did not expect it the way that it was presented. There was also a lot of language, and there was a really kind of mean tone to the book. It didn't feel as much like I'm showing you what it's really like for these people as much as it was showing I have this disdain for these people. I get that a little bit too, because as a stay-at-home mom who homeschools my children, it is kind of annoying to me, and I've talked to other people about this before, to see other people that are the huge influencers that are influencing people in those areas, but then you know that they don't actually do it. And how many people waste money on things because they have to have the thing that the person is presenting as being the best thing ever. But it did feel a little bit much, especially when you could tell who it was aimed at. All that to say that I think it was a really interesting concept, and I think it could have been a really good story, but it felt like, to me personally, it felt lazy. I felt like the twist at the end, I thought was dumb. It was interesting. It was an interesting twist, but I thought it was kind of dumb. And I felt like that was, I guess, where I felt like it came in as lazy writing, because it felt like that what we were presented was happening would have been so much more interesting, but harder to write. Like I said, I skimmed most of the end. There are probably things that I didn't pick up on, but I got probably about 2/3 of the way through it before I did finally decide I'm so tired of this. I don't want to read anymore. I just want to find out what happened. So I did get pretty far in this one. Wouldn't recommend it unless you want to be able to talk to people about it because of the fact that it is the buzzy book right now. The next one was super disappointing to me because the other ones I didn't have as high of hopes for, but obviously I always have high hopes for a book. If I read it, I'm hoping I'm going to love it. But this one I really had high hopes for. This is Guardians Forbidden Mountain by Brandon Mull. This is the first book in his new series. And Brandon Mull is one of my favorite authors. I really enjoy his books. He's a middle grade author, and the Beyonders books are my favorite, and then Fablehaven. but I've really enjoyed his books. I haven't loved all of them equally, but I've liked all of them that I had read so far. And then there were the ones that I really liked a lot. So I was really hopeful that this was going to be a great book. And he's been saying a lot of things about it, that it was that he thought it was maybe the best book he'd ever written. And so I was really going into it hoping to love it. Now, it wasn't bad. It was still decent writing. It's very similar to his other books as far as the writing style, but there were a few things that really bothered me. Basically, in this is a fantasy again, but all of his other books have been portal fantasies, meaning somebody from the real world goes through some kind of portal, gets into a fantasy world, and has a quest of some kind. This is not like that. This is all in a fantasy world. I feel like he was trying to maybe write a Brandon Sanderson type fantasy, except for middle grade. And so it felt different than his other fantasy books, even though those had world building and the fantasy element to them. And I just don't feel like he did it as well. It would make sense that he would try to do that because, everybody's trying new things, and I don't fault him at all for trying new things. And I think there's going to be a lot of people that love it. I had some personal issues with it, which I'll get to in a second. And then if you took those out, I just felt like I didn't care about the characters. I really did like one of the main characters a lot, but I still didn't really care what was happening to him. And that's a weird thing. I don't understand how I could feel that way. But most of the characters, it was just kind of like, okay, I'm not really invested. I'm going to talk about some of the bigger problems I have with it in just a second. But first, I want to say that when I was done with it, I did go and try to find videos about it to see if I was the only one feeling this way. And I found a review by Sean Stevenson Books. And this one, he also was a huge Brandon Mull fan and gave a review of this that wasn't a high review. But his does not touch on any of the problems I had as a Christian. So I think that if you don't care about any of the things I'm about to say, then that you should go watch his video and you'll get a really good overview of the problems just as a fantasy reader, as a fan. He also talked about the portal fantasy versus in the world fantasy. I think it was him that said that if your favorite part of the Lord of the Rings books is the first 100 pages or so of Fellowship of the Ring, that you might like this book because it has that kind of slower vibe to it. And he really made me understand what it was about this book that I didn't like as much as the other ones. And that is that while I don't mind the first part of Fellowship of the Ring, that's not my favorite part because I love it once they get the quest. And that was when I realized that the difference between, I think he called it cozy fantasy. And I know a lot of people are into that. But for me, if it's a fantasy book, I want it to have a quest. I want action and quest. So I think that was why it didn't jive with me. I'll reference that video below so you can go watch that if you don't mind any of the other things I'm about to say. What was making me really uncomfortable when I was reading it is, one, the kids in this world, when they are 14, they get the option, if they are worthy enough, to connect with a spirit guardian. And the spirit guardian, I thought maybe it would be a little bit like the spirit animals books that he was a part of, where it's like an animal and they're kind of connected to it, which, that could be a little iffy too, but it didn't bother me in those books. But this is not like that. It's like there's all these spirits around us all the time, mostly good ones and then some bad ones. And you get connected to one of those spirits. It felt icky to me a little bit. This also goes into the next thing, which is this is his most Mormon book ever. And one of the Fable Havens, I think it was in Dragon Watch, one of the books had a Mormon missionary in it. And there were parts of the books that had things happen in them where I could pick up on the theme, but it was more of a Christian theme, not a Mormon theme. And the Mormon missionary, I just thought it was kind of dumb, but it didn't bother me. Obviously, if you didn't know, now you know, Brandon Mull is Mormon, and so many of my favorite authors are Mormon. So that's not uncommon. And it does not bother me as long as the theology doesn't show up in the books. But I would say that this one, if you are not Mormon, you would not think of it, you wouldn't see it. But I started telling my husband some of the things that I was reading, and he was shocked, and he kept saying, wow, because same thing, he saw it as well. It definitely is pointing at the things I think it's pointing at. And that is, like I said, they have to be worthy to get one of these guardians. The older men in this area they call them elders. That is what men in the Mormon church are called when they get a certain level of priesthood. The missionaries are called elders, but also the higher leadership of the church is called elders. He goes into this elder, and the elder does all these questions with him, and he takes him into a spirit form. Like, they can't lie when they're in that form. It felt very much to me like the worthiness interviews that as Mormons we have to do with our bishop, our leader of our little congregation we go to. And so when he used the word worthy about that, I thought that's exactly what it was. It was a worthiness interview. Also, the idea of the fact that when he went into this elder, the elder had him leave his body. And that happened a few times through the book when he was doing those things, where they would leave their body behind and be in the spirit realm with these spirit guardians. And I found it to be a little creepy. And I know that a lot of Christians will probably have problems with that. So I wanted to make sure you knew that that was something that was going to happen in the books. Also, when he goes up to this area to be announced to all the guardians so that they know this kid is about to be able to pick one of us, and they can choose whether they want to be one of the ones to come offer themselves to be his guardian. His dad's guardian takes him in to the area to introduce him to them. When he does that, to introduce them, he taps this staff or something that he was holding 3 times and then says he's here to meet with you. When you go through the Mormon temple, that is how you are introduced to God, is somebody tapping a mallet 3 times onto a little bar. So that was very obvious. And then also it was talked about so often that these are sacred things you cannot talk about, which is what you're told about the temple. And also when you go to the temple as a Mormon, you get a new name that you are not allowed to tell anybody. And he finds out his dad's guardian's name, and he is not allowed to tell anybody that name. There's even one time in the book where he makes a promise to somebody, and they make a throat oath, is what they call it. Now, I don't know if Brandon Mull knows Mormon history, that they used to have to make an oath to cut your own throat if you told anybody anything, because that's been taken out since when I went through the temple, it had already been taken out. And so I'm assuming, since he's a little bit younger than me, I think, or around the same age as me, that it also was taken out before he went through. So I don't even know if he knows about that, but it still felt like it was a nod to it. So he might know. I don't know. Those things made me super uncomfortable. So I feel like I want to kind of wait and see when the rest of the series comes out, see what people say about it, see if the story itself gets any better. But those were the things that made me iffy about it. And because I wasn't enjoying the story as much, I just kind of skimmed. Again, this is another book that I read most of it. And it was just the last little bit that I skimmed enough to, in my mind, I'm like, well, it's not quite a DNF, but I didn't read every single word of it by the time I got to the last third of the book. It's a really beautiful book with cool swords on the pages and everything. And it just makes me sad because I really had high hopes for this, but I felt like it was very necessary for me to share all of that because a lot of you are Christians, and I know a lot of you would not be comfortable with reading those things or knowing that there was so much Mormon influence in it. And the next one was also a pretty big disappointment just because I had really high hopes for it, even though I've never read anything by this author, but also because I know a lot of you will be disappointed because this has come so highly recommended to me. I did read the whole thing, but there were a few times when I didn't want to keep reading. So this was a very middle of the road book for me. This wasn't a DNF. This wasn't terrible rating, but very middle of the road for me. This was Secrets of Avigdor, Redemption Pirates, Book 1. And this is by Chaney Hobson. This is basically pirates and dinosaurs. These people end up on an island, dinosaur-like creatures on it. It kind of felt like Dinotopia, if you've ever read that, where the animals are integrated with the people and they use them for things. So I think this book might have been edited after this edition, but I liked this cover better than the newer ones, and so I decided to get it. But I keep hearing people talk about a prologue, and mine didn't have a prologue. So I don't know how much of it is different if you went out and bought it, the newer version right now, but I felt like the writing wasn't that great. So I did feel like it got better as the book went along. But it felt like that the conversations when they were talking, it went back and forth between casual and formal all the time. So I didn't feel like there was a constant tone to the book. I felt like there was a lot of over-explaining. I did like the faith content in it. However, sometimes I felt like it was in spots where I didn't feel like it fit as well, and I felt like it repeated itself. I am not at a point where I would say I wouldn't read any more of the books, but I would say that I felt like that this wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. And I'm not in a rush to read any more of the books. Before I would buy any more, I would have to know that the writing gets better. But I do think it was a good idea. So I don't know. It was disappointing. Like I said, it's probably like a three and a half star, just based on the idea and some of the things in it that I thought were good. I liked the characters together. However, I still felt like I liked the guy better than the girl. And then I read Ray Bradbury's A Sound of Thunder and Other Stories. I talked about this in my TBR video. And I did decide with this to only read the short stories that were having to do with dinosaurs, since that's why I was reading it. And then I will go back and read the other short stories later. But I read quite a few short stories before I got to that point. It was just that some of them were good and some of them weren't as good, and I wasn't enjoying some of them as much. So as far as I know, the ones that had to do with kind of dinosaur-ish themes were the very first one, The Foghorn, and then A Sound of Thunder, so the one that it's named after. I feel like there was one other one, but I can't remember what it was. There's one about a dragon, so that one might have been. I liked The Sound of Thunder. That one in particular, it was a little gruesome, a little bit. So I would have given that short story itself maybe about a 4-star. Because I did think it was interesting, but it was also kind of yucky. But it did make me think, and I thought it was interesting. And there were things that as I was reading it, I thought, okay, but what about this? And then he would answer that. So he is a great writer because he obviously thinks of those holes as he's writing them. And then The Foghorn was the very first one in the book. And that one, I put it more of a 4.5. That one really packed a punch in such a short story. It was only a few pages, and I thought it was really interesting, and it made me think about it. Days later, I was still thinking about it. So I am still very interested in Ray Bradbury's writing, but I didn't want to share it with the later books that were as high as those 2 short stories were, just because I felt like, since I didn't read the whole thing, I don't want to rate the whole book that highly, because I don't know for sure if I could recommend all of the short stories in it. While I'm still in like the 3 areas, this was about a 3.75. I'm really weird with numbers. And just so you know, since I don't usually share my star ratings on here, I'm pretty stingy with 5 stars. 5 stars is like, I love this book. I probably wouldn't change anything about it, except for maybe if it has swearing in it, maybe I would change that. But it's still, whatever's in it, I love it enough that I can put up with it. Anything in the 4 range is, I love this book. It's probably a favorite, but it's not my absolute favorite. And so in 3s, if you're in the 3, it means I liked the book. I liked things about it, but there's something keeping it from the 4. And then 2 is I didn't like it. 1 is I hated it, etc. So that's kind of where it goes. So I like to use Storygraph now more than Goodreads, because they let you do quarter stars. And so then I've started doing that in my own reading journal as well. So I put this at like a 3.75. This is The Curse He Chose by... Let me see it. It's hard to read this red on black. Alison Regina Gliot, and she is a nun. And that was what really intrigued me when I heard about this book, is a nun writing vampire stories. And it is a very Catholic story. It has the Catholic faith woven throughout it. It is, certain things of how she is protected from different vampires. I would say that the best comparison would be Twilight, as far as the way it's written and some of the ideas and themes behind it, as far as, a young girl and a vampire boy. But it didn't grab my attention and grip me as much as Twilight. Like when I read Twilight the first time, and I have that recent video about Twilight where I was, saying the things that I don't like about it, but it still was a book that made me want to read the next book. And this one, I'm like, I might get to the next one. Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure. I really did like the way the faith protected her, but also the vampire, and the way the Eucharist and the church were looked at felt very much like Dracula. So I did really like that approach. Like I said, it was one that I went back and forth on, because I did enjoy it. And there were things that made me roll my eyes a little bit, but then other things that I really liked. So if you like vampire books a lot, and that sounds at all interesting, then you might want to check it out. But I wouldn't say it's a must read. And then also around that same rating is The Lost World by Michael Crichton. This is the sequel to Jurassic Park. Oh my gosh, I have so many things to say about this. So soon there will be another deep dive video talking all about this book and then the movie, because I did watch it right afterward again. So I don't want to say too much right now, except that a little bit of a spoiler for my feelings on it is that there was something that I was really upset about not being in the movie. And when I reread this, it was not in the book. So that must have been my imagination. I have no idea where it came from. So that is going to be fun to talk about. And then also, this book has some really, really good moments, but it is not as good as Jurassic Park. So I was surprised by that, because for some reason in my memory, I thought that it was almost as good as Jurassic Park. If you are interested in my thoughts more on that, I would say tune in. It will be coming soon. But also, if you're wanting to read this and you're planning on doing it before my review video comes out, do know that this one has a lot more swearing than Jurassic Park 2. Between some of the heavier books in May, I read this Archie comic book. This was the collector's edition that just came out. It's a giant one. It says 85th anniversary celebration. And I bought this before my trip, thinking that I would take it on the trip, and then if I ever wanted to read something but didn't have a lot of time, I'd flip through it, kind of like a magazine. And I never did. So I sat down one afternoon and just read through this. I was wondering if there was going to be any of the comics from ones that I own, because I still have my Archie comic books from when I was a little kid. I loved Archie comics growing up, and I still have them. They're up on my shelf above me a little ways. It was really fun. There was only one in here that was one that I remember. The other ones might have been in some of mine, but there was just one that stuck out that I knew, okay, I know I've read that one a bunch of times. But it was fun. It was fun to just read through it. I don't know if it's better than just getting, one of the smaller ones, but it was fun to read through. I enjoyed it. It's very nostalgic. And then now going into the 4-star range, I read The Atlas of Untold Stories by Sara Brunsvold. I read this for the Inklings book club I have with my mom, and I really enjoyed this book. I didn't enjoy it as much as her other book, Mrs. Kip, but I still really liked it. It was kind of thematic to read it so soon after getting back from a road trip. In this book, it is a woman who wants to be an artist, and her mom, I guess, her dad is pretty supportive. Her mom is not very supportive. And her sister is kind of like the perfect child, and she always feels like she's just not good enough. And she ends up, when she's trying to tell her mom about what she's about to do career-wise, she ends up instead inviting her to go on a road trip with her. And then the sister ends up being invited by the mom. So they all go on this road trip together, and it's a literary road trip. It's in the Midwest. And I thought that was really interesting and fun. And I enjoyed the places that they went to visit, learning about the different places and the different authors that they were talking about. I really liked Chloe, the main girl, for the most part. There were some things about her I didn't like, but for the most part, I really liked her. But I never really liked her mom and sister. And even by the end, I really wasn't warmed up to them. I understood them a little bit more, and I liked some things about them, but I really didn't ever feel like I had that moment of completely changing my mind about them. I did have a few moments when I had tears come to my eyes. There were a few moments that did that to me. So yeah, I enjoyed the experience. I enjoyed the book. I feel like she's a really good writer. And I did write down a few quotes. Resilient and hurt could be impossible to tell apart. Both her mom and sister seemed content in their own boxes. They didn't explore more than they had to, didn't notice more than was necessary, or form an opinion that fell outside their presumptions. Then another one, mothers should always reach for their children first. That one was convicting to me. I wanted to make sure I'm doing that with my own children. I think I felt that way before in my life, the way Chloe felt, where she was trying to do all these really fun things and go outside the box a little bit, and that it's hard for the people around her to see outside of that box that they were in. So I definitely did relate to her in a lot of ways as well. So yeah, I really did like that one a lot. I read The Weight of Glory by C.S. Lewis, and this was a collection of different essays, or it might have even been talks that he did. It did feel like there were a couple of times when it got a little bit more, not boring, but more dry. Ones that I didn't find as interesting. My favorite essays were The Weight of Glory and The Learning in Wartime. I wrote down a lot of quotes from this, but I don't want to go through every single one of them. He was talking about how people wait for life to become normal to do things. And he said life has never been normal. It's so true. And I think so many of us do that. Oh, well, I'll get to that. I'll change that. I'll, worry about that when life calms down. And it never does. Favorable conditions never come. And 100% of us die, and that percentage cannot be increased. I thought that was such a good one. Like, to stop and be like, yes, that's obvious. We all know that. But it just hit something. I don't know. As a family, we were reading The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel over the last few months. And so we just finished this right at the end of May. I really liked it. However, we did read right before this, we read Cold Case Christianity, and they both were someone who was an atheist who was trying to disprove Christianity and instead proved it to themselves and became a Christian and used their tools of their trade. The other one worked in law enforcement and forensics. This one, Lee Strobel, worked in journalism. And I felt like the stories were so similar that I kind of wished we hadn't read them back to back, because it did feel like it was a lot of the same information, but it was really good. So I really enjoyed it. I feel like it's a really good book. And especially for anyone questioning things, I think it's a really good look at the ways that you don't have to just take things by faith only. But when it really came down to it, I actually think I liked the first one better, The Cold Case Christianity. I think I did prefer that of the two. The new Ande Pliego book, The Library After Dark, came out, and I loved You're Fatally Invited. So I was so excited for this, pre-ordered it, couldn't wait to, as soon as it got here, I started reading it. I would say that this one has a bunch of people that go to a library, and it's an after hours tour, and then people start getting murdered. So just like her first book, it is like a closed door type of book where you're trying to figure out, okay, it's got to be somebody in this group that is doing this and figure out what's going on. I did not like this one as much as You're Fatally Invited. I felt like it was a little bit more violent, but I'm actually not sure if it was or not. Both of them kind of toe that line where a couple of times it gets a little bit yucky, but it never feels like too gratuitous. But I felt like this one was I felt like it was a little bit darker as well. This one actually gave me a little bit of anxiety, and I had to stop reading it at bedtime and only read it during the day. But I still liked it, and I still was very on the edge of my seat wanting to know what happened. I felt like that the ending should have been a little bit different, but I don't want to give out why, because that would be a spoiler. But it wasn't quite as high as her last book, but I still think it's really good. I think she has a lot of promise. Oh, this one also had a little bit more swearing, I think, in it than the other one did. I think I have said on here that the other one didn't have swearing, and then my daughter read it and was like, Mom, it had a lot of swearing, and I don't know why I didn't notice. So if you took a review from me on that and I haven't cleared that up, I can't remember if I did or not. The first one does have swearing. This one has a little bit more swearing. It doesn't have any F words, as far as I can remember. I think I would have written it down if it did, but it does have a little bit more swearing. The very first book I read in May was The Pelican Brief. I had been wanting to rewatch the movie from the 90s, and so I wanted to reread the book first, because it had also been all the way from the 90s since I read the book. In this one, there is a person who is murdered inside of a theater that shows pornographic movies. So it mentions those kind of things, but it doesn't have any details. And it does have a little bit of swearing, but not a lot, especially for this kind of book. It's kind of surprising to me how little it has, because I guess I'm comparing it to books that are similar nowadays. But I found this story to be so compelling still, even though I knew what was going to happen. I had forgotten a lot of the little details, and I felt like this was such good writing and such an interesting story. And then when I watched the movie, I still loved it. I thought it was so well done. And I did find out afterward that he had Julia Roberts in his mind when he was writing Darby in this. And so that was kind of cool, because I was picturing her as I read it, because of knowing that that was who was playing her in the movie. The Denzel Washington playing the main guy in it would not have been who he pictured, because he wrote him as a white man and it was very different. But I'm so glad that they had Denzel Washington, because I feel like he added so much warmth to that character in the movie that wasn't necessarily in the book. So I feel like it was a really good adaptation. So basically, it's a story of somebody who is high up in the government. There's some murders, there's some assassinations, and Darby is a young law student, and she comes up with a theory about why and who. And of course, a lot of people are going to not take her seriously, because if the FBI and the CIA aren't saying that this is true, and you're just this person that's, investigating it on your own, that tends to be the way a lot of people think. Like, well, leave it to the professionals. You don't know what you're talking about. And yet, just like in real life, a lot of times the people that are doing it on their own, that don't have any ties or obligations to people, tend to be the ones that find the information a lot of times. And so people start dying that have to do with her. And this brief that she's written. And so then you kind of know, obviously, it means that she's come a little close to the truth. And then I also had talked about how I wanted to reread Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code series this year and see if I still enjoy them. And the first one is Angels and Demons. And this one is a prequel to Da Vinci Code, obviously, but he wrote it afterward, I believe. And so it's the same character as in Da Vinci Code, Robert Langdon. In this, he has someone from CERN, the scientific place, I believe it's in Switzerland, reach out to him and say, you are this expert on the Illuminati, and we have this person who's been murdered and Illuminati is branded on their chest. And so he goes, flies there, and gets caught up trying to figure out who did the murder. And they end up in Rome. It has a lot to do with the Vatican being targeted. And I just don't want to give away too much if you haven't read it. It's a definite page turner. And since it had been so long since I read it, I really didn't remember hardly anything. Even the bad guy, I did not remember. To the ending, there were some things that I felt like would have been more satisfying in the ending than how it actually ended, but I still thought it was good. So far, I am still enjoying it. So I don't know when I'll get to Da Vinci Code, because I believe that's the second one, but I will be getting to that sometime in the next few months because I am interested in continuing. Then I read Fallout by Carrie Stewart Parks. You might remember that last year, her book about Mountain Meadows Massacre in Utah was one of my favorite books of last year. And I've wanted to read something else by her. And I got a little nervous before I read it because I've heard people saying that they didn't like this book. And when I started to look up reviews from people I knew that had read it, and it seemed like that was kind of a general consensus that a lot of people didn't like this one as much as a lot of her other books. So I was a little bit nervous. However, that was not my experience. I really liked this book. It was really fast paced. I felt like it was really interesting. I guessed one of the villains, but I still wasn't completely sure until it was for sure that I was right. And once I hit about the middle of it, I could not put it down. So I really enjoyed it. This has a lot to do with a cover-up, a government cover-up, and people who are trying to make sure that it stays covered up, but then others who are trying to get some revenge. And it's really interesting. Only thing I can say is a weakness in that book is that there were a few characters who died, and I didn't feel like the people around the characters reacted in a way that you would expect them to react to someone who had just died. I felt like that there should have been a little bit more emotion involved with the deaths, but I still really enjoyed it. I also listened to 2 audiobooks this month. I was able to get through Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets and Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban with the full cast audio on Audible, and I really liked those. I did mention in the video where I talked about listening to the very first one that sometimes I felt like it was too loud in the background, but I felt like that got better as the books have gone along. I didn't feel like I was noticing that as much in the third one at all. So I'm really enjoying it. I feel like a couple of the people that they chose for voice actors are not that great, where they don't sound like I expect that person to sound, but it's fine. I love those books, especially Prisoner of Azkaban. That's one of my very favorites in the whole series. And it was really fun to listen to the full cast audio of those. I have 2 more. So I read Into a Golden Era by Gabrielle Meyer. This is book 7 in the Timeless series. This one just came out, and I was really eager to get to it and hoping I would like it. In this one, the 2 different time periods are the golden era of Hollywood and then the gold rush. So both in California. And this is one of my favorites so far. I think that this is either my first or second, probably. I really liked the time periods. I really liked the characters. I was going to say especially which one, but that might be spoiling which side I liked better. But I felt like it was so good. And I feel like Gabrielle Meyer, I keep expecting the books to get more boring or more, just to not get as much out of them. How often can you do the same kind of storyline without it getting weaker? But I feel like she isn't getting weaker. I feel like every single time there's a twist that the other ones didn't have. And I felt that way again with this one. So I really liked this one. But my one warning of this is that if you have not read Little Women and you want to, this does spoil a lot about Little Women. It wasn't quite a 5-star, but it was up there pretty close. I really, really liked it. So the last one, I don't know where it is right now. I don't know where my copy went, but this was a 5-star. So this was my favorite book of the month, and it was Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. I was so shocked by this book. I felt like that the story itself was so compelling, and I also felt like he didn't waste a word. And I've heard other people with reviews of it that I would say wouldn't agree with me on that. but I just felt like his writing was just impeccable. And this story is this man who, lives in this city, and he's a firefighter, but in this world, firefighters burn the books and nobody's allowed to read them. And the information is given to them and it's all wrong information. And he meets someone who makes him start thinking. And that, of course, opens the can of worms. By the time it got to the end, there was one thing that happened that I was really confused by, and it felt out of place for me. I went back and I was looking up some stuff. Okay, what did I miss here? Did I miss something? And I realized that there were hints of this thing throughout the whole book that I somehow had missed. The way I felt at the end was the way I think he wanted me to feel, because it was showing how little these people noticed that all these things were happening, and I noticed all of these things happening just like them, but I was so oblivious to it until the end. And that is really hard to describe without having spoilers here, but it made me think so much. I still am thinking about it weeks later, and I loved it. It was one of my favorite books of the year so far. Obviously my favorite in May. One of them that I really liked, he said he was not happy. He said the words to himself. He recognized this as the true state of affairs. He wore his happiness like a mask, and the girl had run off across the lawn with the mask, and there was no way of going to knock on her door and ask for it back. Throughout the book, he talks about a lot of people don't talk about anything, nobody's discussing anything, nobody does anything. And that just really resonated with me, because I feel that way sometimes in life, where I want to talk about things and I'm so interested by things, and I just want other people to care and notice and see things and all of that. But yeah, I really loved it. So favorite book of the month. It's so funny to me that in April I read 2 books, and then in May I read this many. It was a lot of books. And June is looking like it will probably be a lot too, I hope. I would love to know if you've read any of these, and if you have any favorites among these, or, give me your differences of opinion on some of these, if you've loved ones I didn't like, or if you hated ones I did. And if any of these have made you curious, if you're going to want to read any of these books.